Monday morning. Hope everyone had a pleasant weekend. Fat Boy has to come make his appearance. Don't you? You gonna let me read, please? Please? Let's see. So we were reading about the 4 essential archetypes that we all have. Prostitute, victim, saboteur, and child. And finished that. But I was thinking about reading the next chapter about the shadow work. Shadow. It's like so important. Shadow aspects of ourselves that we tend to ignore because, I don't know, in my experience, it kind of makes you feel bad, right? But it's also so essential in our survival, in my experience. So I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to reread these shadow pieces. Living in the shadow. Although our archetypical patterns are essentially neutral, they do have a both light and shadow aspect. The word shadow itself suggests a dark, secretive, possibly malevolent countenance that looms in the background of our nature, ready to do harm to others as well as to ourselves. A much more appropriate understanding of the shadow aspect of our archetypes, however, is that they represent the part of our being that is least familiar to our conscious mind. Whether the shadow becomes our friend or enemy depends largely upon ourselves, wrote Louise von Franz, Jung's closest colleague and confidant. The shadow is not necessarily always an opponent. In fact, it is exactly like any human being with whom one has to get along, sometimes by giving in, sometimes by resisting, sometimes by giving love. Whatever the situation requires, the shadow becomes hostile only when it is ignored or misunderstood. The queen is among my own personal family of archetypes, for example, and it serves me quite well when I'm teaching a workshop. I have to be certain that everything I need so that I can work at my peak is ready when I need it. From my travel accommodations to the whiteboard I write on, even a cup of tea with honey to soothe my throat for all my talking. My queen makes darn sure everything is just like it's supposed to be, or heads will roll. But at other times, when I least expect it, my shadow queen can make an appearance and I start demanding things in an inappropriate way. Often, I'm not aware of my queen's agenda until after she's come and gone. It remains in the shadow until I take a good look at whatever damage it may have done. I'll never forget the time I blew up at a couple of airline ticket agents because my flight had been delayed and I felt they weren't being straight with us passengers. As I stormed off in disgust, a young couple who had been waiting in line behind me caught my eye and came over. I thought they were going to thank me for speaking out, but instead, the man said, "We just wanted to tell you how much we love your workshops." "Yes," the woman said, "we have all your books and tapes." I wanted to tell them that they'd just seen a textbook example of the Shadow Queen in action, but I was too humiliated to say anything. I just thanked them and kept walking on. It was about what I'd deserved for attacking a couple of airline employees who were probably just doing their jobs. The shadow aspects of our archetypes are fed by our paradoxical relationship to power. We are intimidated by being empowered as we are by being disempowered. The disempowerment is a threat to our well-being is easy to understand, at least at the surface level. But why should we also fear becoming empowered? That, in essence, is the paradox that feeds the shadow. The shadow can be seen as an unexplored power. It expresses itself through behavior that often sabotages our express wishes and image of ourselves. These complex aspects of our personalities filter into our behavior by outwitting our conscious minds, after which they often assume a dominant role. We frequently don't know why we do the things we do or why we have to cope with inexplicable fears. This leads to painful conflict when we feel one way and act another. When we feel one way and act another, separating our mind and heart. Living with mind and a heart divided is like having two battle encampments within, each one fighting for authority over our power of choice. When isolated from each other, the heart and mind are each handicapped. The mind tends to become hyper-rational and the heart overly emotional. The imbalance of forces fragments our power, and like a nation in which opposing forces are constantly at war with each other, when our nature is fragmented, it is vulnerable to being dominated by fear. As Jesus said, if a kingdom is divided against itself, it cannot stand. Even when we know we are acting fearfully, we sometimes choose to be willfully ignorant about it. If I don't know why I am acting in a negative fashion, then it is easy to excuse my behavior or blame someone else. But if I am aware, both emotionally and intellectually, that I am harming another being, I not only have to hold myself accountable, I must also admit that I consciously chose to be negative. I can no longer hide behind the state of confusion created by the split between heart and mind. As long as your mind and heart lack a channel of clear communication, you will be confused about what to do with your life. Inevitably, as soon as you make contact with your life's passion, which can mean finding your vocation, your life partner, or even your sexual identity, you're going to experience a kind of spiritual suffering until you act on that passion. That suffering is actually a form of divine motivation, urging you to pursue a more authentic life. That suffering is actually a form of divine motivation, urging you to pursue a more authentic life. Awareness of a greater truth adds time pressure to your psyche and spirit, because the more you know, the faster you need to respond to that truth. I call this spiritual accountability. If you realize that negative judgments, including judging yourself, cause harm, then you must reevaluate your behavior as soon as you realize that you are being judgmental. You also need to recognize when you are justifying yourself and your actions. Judging others and creating excuses while knowing better are only two of the spiritual challenges that will arise as you work with your survival archetypes. The more aware you are of the demands of managing your consciousness, the fewer hiding places will be available in your psyche and soul for the shadow play of the child, victim, prostitute, and saboteur. The relationship between awareness and responsibility also applies to your health. Once you become aware of how toxic anger or guilt is to your body and spirit, the consciousness of these energies poisons become more pronounced than if you did not know better. If for no other reason than you know than you now know their biological effects. This is negative visualization in action. So I'll read a little bit more tomorrow. Let's read what archetype we left off on, which was, where were we? Man, I don't remember. I have so many places. Dog-eared. Okay. I do remember reading gossip, so let's read gossip again. Gossip. The gossip archetype is associated with rumor spreading, backbiting, and passing along information that is exaggerated and harmful and intended to disempower. On a professional level, the shadow gossip manifests as publishing misleading information, creating damaging rumors, or hounding celebrities for their photos. Although everyone is prone to listening to and spreading gossip in some way, a gossip archetype thrives on the power that is generated by passing around information that is secret or private. Most people would hesitate to choose this archetype because of its negative implications, yet many others make their living in the business of political, social, and entertainment gossip in a positive way. The archetype is connected to lessons of truth, integrity, and honoring the trust another has placed in you. In assessing your connection to the gossip, review how many of your life lessons have emerged from participating in gossip that has harmed another and then coping with the consequences. Do you measure the quality of a relationship by whether a person is willing to share secrets with you? Films. Rosalind Russell in The Women. Richard Hayden in Sitting Pretty. Burt Lancaster in The Street Smell of Success. Oh, The Sweet Smell of Success. John Malkovich and Glenn Close, Dangerous Liaisons. Religion and Myth. Ratatosk, in Norse myth, a squirrel whose name means swift teeth, lives in the world tree called Yggdrasil and is a notorious gossip.